George Osborne, the UK's Chancellor, has just delivered the budget statement for 2014, and joining me now to discuss all the political implications is George Parker, the FT's political editor. George, this was a budget with a lot of headline figures, most notably that economic growth for this year has been revised up to 2.7%, but it's the penultimate budget before next year's general election, so how political was it?
It's always a political budget. When it's George Osborne delivering it, you know it's going to be intensely political. So there was lots of very serious stuff there about reinforcing the recovery, making the British economy more resilient. But there were some measures targeted straight at the kind of voters that George Osborne and his Conservative Party need to win over at the next election. So, for example, we had help for older voters, key voters, with their pension arrangements. And we also had a range of measures aimed at people in the C1, C2 social group who the Tories need to win back, particularly from UKIP, the anti-European party. Things, for example, like the rise in the personal tax allowance, which helps lower income people, a cut in beer duty, always very popular, even a cut in bingo duty. So as with George Osborne's budget, it's always very political. And the big trap he has set is he's announced a welfare cap on the amount of money the government will spend on welfare through to the next Parliament. His big test for Labour is whether they will support that cap or not, and obviously his hope is that they won't.
And the Chancellor also said that abandoning the economic plan that is working is the biggest risk. So in other words, if you vote for Labour, then the economic recovery could be thrown off track. Was that the biggest message he was trying to get across here?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult message for George Osborne, because on the one hand, he wants to say, look, the recovery is coming through and there are some benefits for you in it. Ordinary voters still start to feel the benefit of the recovery. But on the other hand, he wants to present to voters the prospect of the next election that we're not out of the woods, the job's not done, the deficit will still be huge running right through to the next Parliament. Who do you trust with the cuts programme to put the economy back on track? And so, whilst there was some, what you might call handouts of very limited nature in this budget, the big focus was on sticking to the economic plan, cutting the deficit, and trying to put Labour on the back foot on public spending questions.
And speaking about handouts, it seemed like there was something for everyone in this budget. Is that true?
Well, there was. You could argue there is something for everything. There's cutting the personal tax allowance, but benefits everyone earning up to £100,000. But as I mentioned earlier, the big focus really was on these two very disparate groups of the electorate. The older voters, who he wants to help with their savings, with their pensions, and with the people further down the income scale, and he's targeting his help. And that's disappointing for many Tory MPs who would like him to be focusing much more on traditional Tory voters, people in the middle income bands, if you like. But that isn't George Osborne's concern at the moment. Those people are going to vote Tory anyway. His concern are the people who've left the Tories to support UKIP or Labour.
So he's obviously targeted certain voters. How has Labour responded so far?
Well, Labour's big message is not that the economic plan's not working anymore. The British economy is growing faster than any other major economy. Unemployment's coming down very fast. More their absolute laser focus of Ed Miliband, and we heard that in the House of Commons, is there's a cost of living crisis, that the recovery is not feeding through to ordinary people's lives. People still feel worse off than they were in 2010 at the time of the last election. And he's reinforcing that message by trying to present David Cameron and his Conservative Party as being elitist, out of touch. So that's the Labour response, that, OK, the recovery's happening, but you aren't feeling it, ordinary voters.
And will that be the main focus of debate between now and the next election, that falling living standards, or has George Osborne shifted the political debate at all?
Well, George Osborne needs to shift the debate, because really the next British election is what the question is. That's the big defining issue. Labour wants to be the question about who's going to look after you and your family most effectively, cost of living argument. And George Osborne wants to ask the question, who do you trust with the long-term future of the British economy? So it's a big battle over the question. George Osborne has tried to shift the debate in this budget. Ed Miliband keeps trying to tug it back.
And the Tories present themselves as the party of business, but this is also a party that's promised a referendum on the EU if they are re-elected. So is that still the case? Are they still the party of business?
Well, I think it's true that the budget will please a lot of business people, the capital allowances, the exports and all the rest of it. But there's a big underlying question behind all that, which is, lots of these companies export to the European Union. Will Britain still be in the EU in 2020? Now, the Conservative Party is offering an in-out referendum if they win the next election, throwing Britain's membership into doubt. Labour has basically said there won't be a referendum. So there's a lot of the stuff in this budget that business will like, but still at the back of their minds they'll be wondering, is George Osborne and his party going to take us out of the European Union?
Okay, thanks very much, George. And for more comment and analysis, go to ft.com/budget.